Hey everyone, this is the Rewriter writing in. Typically, I don't cover TV on my channel as I watch more movies and play more video games, but I have to rewrite Season 1 of Book of Boba Fett. Being a huge Star Wars fan, as well as a big Boba Fett fan, I was pretty hyped for this show. We were finally going to see that seedy, crime-ridden world that George Lucas wanted to show us in his cancelled show, Star Wars Underworld, as well as putting Boba Fett front and center. This was mine and a lot of Star Wars fans' dream show, so I had some expectations for it. But because of the title of the video shows that I'll be rewriting it, you can see that I wasn't impressed, to put it lightly. All the potential this show had to be awesome was flushed down the toilet, leaving it up to the fandom to redeem it. So for this series, I'll be using the skeleton of the plot that was being set up, but also will be adding and taking out a lot of what was in the show. So basically, I'm going to be making my own original Boba Fett show, using some of the ideas from the regular show. I do want to note that this series isn't going to follow the exact stipulations of the show, meaning that it may or may not be 7 episodes long, and that each episode will vary in length. They won't all be around this 30 to 50 minute mark like in the actual show. But before I get into this rewrite, if at any point you enjoy the video, leave a like and subscribe, it really helps the channel out. But now, let's dive into episode 1 of the Book of Boba Fett. An explosion fills the screen as Boba Fett and his band of mercenaries flood into Jabba's palace through the smoke and flames. Gamorrean guards rush in with their axes, chopping down some of the mercenaries before they're gunned down by Boba's EE-3. As they get farther into the courtyard, palace guards surround them, but are quickly taken out by the knife in the dark, Fennec Shand. Boba looks at her for a moment and nods his head, as she nods back, and they continue taking down the barrage of thugs. No matter how many thugs are thrown at him, none stand a chance against Boba, who mercilessly takes down each of them one by one. Even the mercenaries allying themselves with Boba note his ruthlessness and determination for seizing the throne. Using every weapon and gadget in his arsenal, Boba explodes, burns, and knifes his way through the bodyguards. Slaughtering the battalion of soldiers guarding the throne room, Boba bursts the door open with an explosive charge, sending the front door guards flying into the walls and falling down. Boba walks past them, shooting them on the ground as he menacingly inches towards Bib Fortuna, who's visibly shaking on his throne. His voice stuttering, he tells Boba that he can't do this. He owns Tatooine. No one dares challenge him. Boba sinisterly chuckles, telling Bib that he has a couple options here. Either his life ends quickly and painlessly, or as a tasty treat for that rancor downstairs. Bib cries out, saying that he has no idea who he's messing with. They won't take this betrayal lightly. Everyone he knows will suffer because of his decision. They'll take everything from him. Boba puts his blaster into Bib's neck, telling him that he has nothing to lose. Bib's frightened lips form a demented smile as Boba feels a thud in the back of his helmet and hears a voice telling him that for once that lying sack of crap told the truth. Boba really has no idea who he's messing with. Boba wakes to a red flashing light inside his helmet, as well as red text confirming that he's in critical condition. Breathing heavily, Boba feels intense friction against his arms and legs as he tries to move them, but they're tangled in something. Boba's helmet feed cleans up a little as he sees slime on his visor, but not much else. The walls begin pulsating back and forth, like it's swallowing. Moving his head to the side, he sees a dead stormtrooper with acid eating away at his helmet and armor, and a tentacle wrapped around his torso. A tentacle began wrapping itself around Boba's leg as he started to struggle, reaching for his blaster rifle that was to his right. Boba made a fist, spewing fire out of his gauntlet as the sarlacc began quaking. Time was of the essence, as Boba didn't want to spend any more time in this beast's belly. Boba was finally able to reach for his blaster and began shooting near the top of its mouth. The beast opened its mouth, uttering a thunderous roar as he began scaling up its throat. Using his knife, Boba began climbing out of the beast's throat by burying his knife and using the rest of his strength to climb while his jetpack was recalibrating. Tentacles started to lash at him as he began blasting them back. As one tentacle was shot down, 2 more would spring from the depths, grabbing his legs. As they were pulling him down, his HUD flashed, telling him that his jetpack had been recalibrated. The thrusters on his back heated up slowly, but then roared as the ignition punched the jetpack into overdrive, roasting the tentacles below him. Boba flew out of the sarlacc's mouth and plummeted to the sand around him. Putting his head back for a moment, he soon sprung up when half of the beast came out of its hole and screeched at him. Thrusting his chest forward, he released the missile on his back, which found itself placed directly on the top of its throat, causing it to explode in a mess of green blood that blanketed Boba and the sand surrounding him as the sarlacc fell back, sliding coldly down its hole. Now covered in blood, slimy stomach acid, and sand, Boba cleaned off his visor once again, attempting to reconnect the tracker on Solo and the Jedi, but his navigational AI was damaged in the attack. And with the last of his reserves on his jetpack being used, Boba's only option was to walk through the dune sea. Holstering his EE-3, he stumbled up the hill and walked as far as he could go. Angry that he allowed himself to get humiliated by Solo, Boba couldn't help but scream into the vastness of the desert that encompassed him. His legacy, his father's legacy, all turned to sand and ashes as the Fett line of warriors and leaders would end in such a dishonorable way. Exhausted, Boba slowly slumped to the ground as the intense heat from the suns of Tatooine shifted into frigid winds scattering the moon-bathed sands. As he lay on the ground, going in and out of consciousness, he looked out to see blinding light beaming overhead, moving closer and closer to him. The light consumed him as he closed his eyes and lied down still. When he awoke, he shot up, looking around to see a group of jawas surrounding him with stun sticks. He looked down to see that his weapons and armor had been taken off, with only his weapon visible in a bin near the back of the room. Putting his hands slowly in the air, he let the jawas calm down as they scurried around him and back off to their posts. Shaking his head, he mutters to himself how much he hates jawas. He spent the next half an hour scouting the sandcrawler, looking for weaknesses and exits so that he could grab his armor and go as quickly as possible. Making his way to his weapon as quietly as possible, Boba used the roaring of the engine to mask him jumping from the different platforms. At one point, Boba had to grab a couple jawas and throw them out of the right side windows. He then sees his armor, still propped in the bin, almost like a trophy, and heads towards it. But as he approaches it, the sandcrawler begins to violently shake as Boba loses his balance. He looks out one of the side windows, seeing a band of Tusken raiders attacking. They begin firing rifle shots at the hull as all the jawas begin being frantic and running around the place. Boba stays calm, grabbing his weapon and running to the top of the sandcrawler. Smoke filled the air as he looks out to see the raiding party had blown the tracks off and were boarding from the bottom. Sniping the scouts that stayed outside the sandcrawler, he contemplated stealing their skiffs and leaving, but he was angry. His honor lost. The only solace he could take now was finishing off these raiders. He slid down the hatch that he came out of and began hunting the Tuskens inside. His skills dwarfed whatever skills they had thought they had, as even with just a blaster at his side, he was still capable of defeating all of them at once. One of the Tuskens slid down the back door with a blaster hole in his chest as Boba slowly walks out of the sandcrawler. He sees a group of 5 standing in a circle, with one wearing a black robe and having a staff. The ones on the sides begin chanting as the leader raises his arms in the air, challenging Boba. But he doesn't have time for this, and begins blasting the surrounding Tuskens until the one with the staff lunges at him, pulling the blaster out of his hands and sweeping his leg. He jumps in the air to stick the blade in his chest, but Boba rolls out of the way, grabbing one of the rifles and slamming it onto his back. He stumbles forward, giving him enough time to get back up. Fists in the air, he waits for it to swing again and grabs the staff, using the midsection to smash it into his face. It reels back onto the ground, grabbing a fistful of sand and throwing it into the air. Boba swings his head back as the Tusken charges at him, tackling him to the ground, knocking the staff out of his hand. It launches a barrage of fists at him as he repeatedly blocks them. Waiting for the right opportunity, he lands a well-placed punch to the Tusken's throat, which sends it off him. Boba rolls to the side, grabbing the staff, using it to sweep the Tusken's leg before he shoves the blade into its chest. Breathing heavily, he looks past the dead Tusken to see that one had gotten away, carrying a large bag, and got onto one of the skiffs, blasting off. Looting the Tuskens of their weapons and equipment, Boba found a holodisc on the leader, and activated the message. At first, it was in the tongue of the Tuskens, but after some adjusting, switched it to a language he could understand. The hologram showed a hooded figure, wearing a helmet that he hadn't seen before. The figure announces to the clan leader that the Empire is gone, and that the Dune Sea has come back into their control. Tribute is to be paid, or they'll be wiped out. This deal is non-negotiable, and they have a week to comply. He replayed the beginning of the message, confused. The Empire? Gone? How long have I been out here? What seemed like days must have been months. Even though that hopeless Tusken probably took his armor, there was no use wearing it anymore. He's an outlaw now. At least, he was wearing that helmet. No one had seen Boba's real face for years now. He can blend back into society, at least whatever new society had been established. Even though at this point, all he wanted was Solo and the Jedi dead. He knew that this was an impossible task for now. They had just thwarted the Empire. It was going to take time, but one day he would get his revenge, and he will be wearing his father's armor. For now, he needed something to fall back on, something to allow him to keep up with his fighting skills, while also keeping tabs on influential people, such as warlords and criminal syndicate leaders. If he's going to get revenge, he's going to need an army. That will come in time. For now, he needed to get out of this sandy tundra. Taking the rest of the supplies, he wrapped himself in the dead leader's black robes, concealing his vast weaponry that he's collected from the bodies, and heads out of the desert. Parking the skiff, Boba feels like he was just here in Mos Eisley, like it was yesterday. Even with the Empire supposedly being taken down, Mos Eisley was just as filthy and crime-ridden as it had always been. Reading holographic articles, the New Order in the galaxy, the so-called New Republic, had been advancing through the galaxy, establishing its new decrees and rules. This was nothing new for Boba. He had seen republics and empires alike fall. This one would fall too. But Jabba and the Hutt clan have had their stake in the criminal underworld for generations, long past republics and empires. That was power and authority Boba respected, almost longed for. Undergoing missions for Jabba and his advisors had been remarkable work. He respected Jabba, and in turn, Jabba respected him. It took years for Boba to gain Jabba's trust, but once he did, Jabba ensured that he got the best jobs with the highest earnings. He treated Boba like he was one of his own, and looked out for him. Boba had never had respect for anyone more besides his father, so getting back to Jabba's palace was the only place he could go. However, at the palace, something had changed. What was once a haven for Jabba's gangs and black market merchants had become shut down tight and held like a military base. Guards posted at every entrance, none of which Boba knew, and automated defenses in each room. Sneaking carefully to the throne room, he saw the last person he'd ever want to see sitting on that throne, Bib Fortuna, Jabba's chief of staff. That slimeball had always made shady deals behind Jabba's back, even though Jabba knew exactly what was happening. But he never disposed of him due to respect for his father, who at one point saved Jabba's life. Bib always wanted that throne. He could see it in his beady little eyes. Jabba showed respect and patience to him, and yet all Bib wanted to do was overthrow him. Boba himself at one point gladly offered to put down Bib, but Jabba held him back, telling him that one day this empire will be Boba's, and at that point he could make the decision to off him. But now that snake was finally where he'd always wanted to be. Listening, Bib was speaking to his inner circle, telling them that Jabba is dead, and that in his dying remarks named him the leader of the Hutt Syndicate. Gripping his blaster tightly, Boba wanted nothing more than to place a shot right between his eyes, but he couldn't. Bib laughs in glee, telling them that he will be overseeing the operations now, and any loyalists to Jabba will be publicly executed. Boba couldn't stand to see that weasel on the throne, but there was nothing he could do now. However, he began formulating a plot. one that would involve him replacing Bib as the true heir to the Hutt Syndicate appointed by Jabba himself. By replacing that scum, he'd have access to Jabba's entire operation, including his vast resources. He could build an army, one that would strike back against the smuggler and the Jedi, the ones responsible for dishonoring him and killing his mentor. A grim smile crept across his face, thinking about the day that he could gun them both down. But for now, he needed to escape Mos Eisley, go to somewhere like Nar Shaddaa, where the crime operations flow like water. Sneaking his way to the hangar bay, he saw his ship locked down with multiple guards around it. Using the staff that he had looted from the Tusken leader, Boba stabbed and sliced the guards in the shadows, pulling them back so no one could hear or see them. Without his armor, he had to be a lot more resourceful, but this wasn't a problem. He had trained under every circumstance imaginable, and these guards stood no chance, as he bested them with ease. Getting back into the Slave One, he used the cannons to break open the locks on the hangar door and blast it off, putting in the coordinates to Nar Shaddaa. The target was a rat, a coward. Once his men were blasted in the head or stabbed in the chest, he took off running. However, he was pretty nimble, able to parkour across rooftops with ease. But even without his jetpack, Boba was able to keep up, running at a speed faster than most humans. He is the clone of, at the time, the galaxy's most dangerous bounty hunter, trained by elite squads of clone commandos from early childhood. Keeping up with some wanted punk wasn't a problem. Scaling rooftops and leaping between flying cars, he reached him, but when Boba tried to grab his arm, he pulled out a stun stick, shoving it in Boba's chest and slamming him in the head. This punk was a bit more resourceful than he had let on. Knocked to the ground, Boba saw a car fly in, filled with his cronies that took off. Rubbing his head, he didn't have a moment to waste, and ran to the edge where a taxi ship was. The droid looked at him, gleefully asking where he would like to go, but was grabbed by the neck and thrown off the car into the depths below, as Boba grabbed the wheel and darted after him. His lackeys looked behind to see Boba chasing them, and began firing blast shots that nicked the vehicle. He ignored these shots, ramming his speeder car directly into the back of the targets, causing a couple thugs to fall off. Putting it in autopilot, Boba jumped from his speeder onto the targets, using his knife to quickly dispatch the rest of the thugs before firing a blast into his leg, causing the speeder to quickly descend. Boba slammed the target's head onto the side and threw him out of the way, navigating the speeder to crash land in an old scrap yard. Throwing him into the arms of a few thugs, a Wee Quay stood up from the booth, thanking him for his service, and handed him a case full of credits. Boba nodded his head, taking the briefcase and stashing it in a secret compartment. He then went to the bar, which glowed with intense neon lights, and observed as a crowd of partygoers were dancing in the club below. This club was in the heart of Nar Shaddaa, with the upper level being the headquarters of the Bounty Hunters Guild. After a few drinks, Boba begins to head out of the bar as a man stops him, saying that he has an opportunity for him, but that it will take him off-world. Boba brushes him off, telling him that he's not leaving Nar Shaddaa and to take his offer elsewhere. Walking away, Boba's arm is grabbed as the man tells him that he knows who he really is and that he's not going to want to pass this up. He rips his arm out of the man's grip and grabs him by the throat. The man, barely able to speak, tells him that he knows he's Boba Fett and that his mission is to take out a traitor within Bib Fortuna's operation. Boba releases his grip and brings him over to a booth at the far end. Sitting him down, he tells him to continue. The man rubs his neck, telling him that this mole is the advisor to Bib Fortuna and is planning to overthrow him. He has a contact for Boba to meet up with, Fennec Shand. She's on another assignment right now, but she'll be able to discuss the details with him when he arrives in Mos Eisley. This job is extremely high paying, and he'll have a favor from the most powerful crime lord in Mos Eisley. He finally says that he knows how close Boba was to Jabba, and by doing this mission, he could have the same position he used to all those years ago. Boba never stopped thinking about the day he would kill Bib and sit on that throne, leading the crime syndicate the way Jabba had intended. Boba tells the man that he's interested in the job, which then the man gives him a tracking fob, one signal tracking the target, the other tracking Fennec. His only requirement is that he does this quietly. The syndicate will be in panic if members of Bib's inner circle are being assassinated. Boba tells him that he understands, he'll get the job done. The man thanks Boba for his service and leaves the bar. Getting back into the Slave One after years of it being dormant, Boba knew that now was the time to overthrow Bib. Pieces were starting to fall into place after years. Thinking of his father, he says that he will regain the lost Fett legacy. That name will ring through the galaxy with fear once again. With almost a tinge of excitement, Boba plugged in the coordinates for Mos Eisley. Arriving back at the dock, Boba couldn't recognize Mos Eisley at all. A once thriving metropolis of organized crime, all under the singular leadership of Jabba the Hutt, the city had now devolved into chaos. Districts cut off from one another as rival gangs battled out in the streets, thugs controlling and capturing citizens for their slave trade operations, and execution victims lining the walkways. Even though crime was always abundant, it was mostly under the surface, as all the different factions worked together to bring about the ultimate goal of making everyone rich. Under Jabba's leadership, none of this would have been happening. Any open declaration of war from one faction would be rooted out and stomped before it could ever get started. But Bib was a fraud and a coward. He only cared about protecting his own interests, letting the rest of Mos Eisley perish due to lawlessness. That was all going to change. He would ensure that things went back to how they were when Jabba ruled, not only to respect him, but also so that when the time came for his army, they would be ready for him. Allowing the tracking fob to update, Boba waited in the local cantina for Fennec Shan to arrive. Hours later, after not showing up, Boba took it upon himself to find her and get the information that he needed. Things were starting to pick up, and he wouldn't allow her to put his plans on hold. Ditching his makeshift armor and the Slave One for the old robes he wore coming back to this place years prior, and a bantha, he set off to look for her. Periodically looking at the fob, he saw that the signal had not changed positions for a long time. Moving through the dune sea in the dead of night brought back memories he had long wished to forget. As he was in thought, he spotted the red glow of a blaster shot a long way in the distance, so he kicked the sides of the bantha for it to move faster as he headed in that direction. It took him much longer to reach her location than he would have liked, but when he did, he saw that she was lying on the ground, dying from a blaster wound. Boba had never met Shand personally, but he had known about some of her exploits during the early days of the Empire. He knew that she had skill, but also honor. Saving her life would put her in a debt to him, something that would be critical in aiding in his overthrow of Fortuna. Picking her up and putting her on the back of the bantha, he rode to a mechanic that he had known from years past, hoping he was still there. Sure enough, he was, but was in the shop alone since it was late at night. Boba knocked at the front gate, which he replied for him to get lost. Operating hours aren't till the morning. Boba called out to Baz, saying that hours shouldn't mean much for an old friend. Baz got up and looked out to see Boba holding Fennec. Baz stumbled to the gate, telling Boba that he thought he had died years ago, and asked where he had been. Boba tells him that it's been hell, but he's ready to come home. But before he can do that, he'll need some help. Boba walks through the gate and sets Fennec on the table. Baz looks at him, asking what he did this time. Failed disintegration? Boba looks him in the eye, telling him that he doesn't fail disintegration targets, but this isn't his handiwork. Baz asks what he wants done with her, with Boba replying that he needs her patched up. Baz replies that he has only crude droid parts, nothing medical grade. Boba answers that they'll do. He needs her up and running as quickly as possible. Only you would put me through something like this, Baz jokes as he tells him to hand him that tool and those spare parts. Hours later, Fennec wakes up, sunlight beaming into her eyes as she looks to the sides. She notices that she's in some sort of mechanic's den and that her stomach is sore. She looks down to see moving parts around where her stomach used to be. She begins to panic as she hears a voice behind her telling her to calm down. With one fluid motion, she flips around, grabbing a scalpel and putting it right up to Baz's neck. Baz reels back, telling her that that's no way to treat her saviors. Saviors? She thinks as she sees another man standing calmly on the other side of the shop. He tells her that he saved her life and that now she's indebted to him. Fennec replies that she isn't indebted to anyone, especially not some unknown raider roaming the desert. Boba tells her his name, saying that his honor is lost, and that she's going to help him regain it. She laughs, telling him that he's lying. Boba Fett died years ago in this very desert. He replies, telling her that yes, in a way he did die that day in the Sarlacc pit, but that he was going to be reborn and assume the throne that rightfully belongs to him. Her eyes widen as she realized that she was talking to the real Boba Fett, a true living legend. Putting the scalpel down, she asks Boba why he returned back here and why save her life. He replies that she is his contact for a mission involving assassinating a traitor in Bib Fortuna's operation, but his plans are different, and he's going to need her help extracting him out. Fennec remembers the mission, but says that another, more lucrative job opened up elsewhere. He tells her that this mission will be more lucrative than any job she has taken or ever will take. If she helps him, she'll receive a lifetime cut of Jabba's fortune. Plus, he knows her honor code, and she is indebted to him. Fennec looks at the moving droid parts around her stomach again, asking him what's their first move. Boba asks her for the information she has on the target. She replies that the target's name is Krant Wantor, a Rodian spy that Jabba employed on many scouting missions. He pledged his allegiance to Bib Fortuna, but Bib was never very clever, as he had always been plotting against him. But he got sloppy and made a mistake, outing him as a traitor. But this information was only known to Bib and a select couple of informants, one of which apparently knew Boba. He asks where this Rodian is located, which she tells him that he is in one of the mansions located in the upper echelon district, where all of Bib's top lieutenants live. But make no mistake, this mansion is more like a fortress, as there are guards everywhere. Boba tells her that that shouldn't be a problem for the two of them. Fennec agrees, but asks if he still has it in him. Boba quickly pulls out a blaster pistol and fires a shot to his right while looking at her. She looks over to see a fried sand lizard corpse smoking on the ground. She nods her head, saying that they should get a move on. Boba and Fennec reached the fortress at the perfect time, as night had fallen. This mansion had overlooked the bloodied, broken city of Mos Eisley. All these leaders in their ivory towers do nothing to ensure wealth flows through the city. Crime is a profession, an art form even, but these leaders treat it like a right. Not for very long. Fennec tells Boba that she'll take the roof and work her way down, while he starts from the basement and works his way towards the middle. Krant will likely be in his safe room located directly in the middle of the house. Boba nods his head as he makes his way towards an entrance to the basement located at the back of the house. Once inside, he notices laser traps and trip mines scattered strategically along the way up to the main floor. Darting and jumping quietly and effortlessly along the maze of lasers, Boba finds a junction box and sticks his staff into it, causing it to short circuit before everything, including the lights, shut down. A couple guards open the entrance to the basement and head down the steps. Lurking in the shadows, Boba knifes one of them in the back before stabbing his staff into the other's head. Dragging their bodies into the darkness that he had crept out of, he got out of the basement and closed the door behind him. The guards were now suspicious, as all the lights were out. They were pacing back and forth, and even Krant came out, demanding to know what was going on. The guards tell him that it's just a glitch and they'll get it up and running as soon as they can. Krant goes back into his room as the guards patrol around the house. Rounding a corner, one of the guards grabbed has his neck broken before he has a chance to fire his blaster shot. Fennec makes her way down, dispatching the rooftop security and breaching into the array, hacking it to ensure that reinforcements couldn't be called. Using her rifle, she begins to pick off the guards patrolling the outer parts of the home. Back inside, Boba dispatches of the other guards quietly and then meets with Fennec outside Krant's door. Together, they kick it down as Krant rolls behind his couch in fear. He grabs his radio, crying for the guards to get here as soon as possible. After hearing only static, they slowly start to walk towards him as his dread begins to grow. Boba grabs him and punches him in the face, slinging him across his shoulder. Fennec then plants explosives, telling him that they should make this look good. Boba turns to her, telling her that this is a quiet op, but she replies that it will look better if it appears as a house fire. He nods his head as they sneak out of the compound, torching the house as it erupts in flames. Krant wakes up when a bag is ripped off his head, as Fennec and Boba are standing in front of him. He cries, telling them that he doesn't know why they're doing this, but to please not kill him. They both look at each other as Fennec tells him that they aren't trying to kill him, or they would have done it back at his house. Krant then demands to know what's the point of this. Boba steps forward, telling him that he knows he's plotting against Bib Fortuna. Krant lies, telling them that he knows nothing of the sort. Fennec replies that lying won't do him any good, and that they're going to help Boba regain control of Mos Eisley. Krant's eyes widen, saying that there's no way this is the actual Boba Fett. Boba walks up to him, telling him that he can believe what he will. He is going to take down Bib Fortuna, with or without him, but he'll get to keep his head if he works with them. Gulping, Krant tells him that he has inside information. He's worth so much more alive. But it's going to take a lot more than just 3 of them to take down Fortuna's operation. Fennec replies, saying to let them handle that. After they leave the room, Boba tells Fennec that before any of this can start, he's not coming back here as a drifter, but as Boba Fett proper. She asks him what he means by this, and he replies that he's going to get his armor back. It's been far too long. And that's episode 1 of my Book of Boba Fett rewrite. Thank you all so much for watching. What did you think of this first episode? Let me know in the comments below. I tried my best and will continue to try throughout this series to treat the character of Boba with respect to the source material that he came from. I want him to be a likable protagonist, but still keep his rough edge and villainous persona, as this is who he is. Disney tried to make him this super nice, kind, and wise mentor, and it just really didn't work. I also wanted Mos Eisley to feel a lot more dangerous to how it was portrayed in the show, and it's only going to get darker from here. I'm still in the planning phase to determine how many episodes I want to make, so let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Leaving a like and subscribing to the channel will help me a lot during this process, and I'd really appreciate it. The links for my Discord and second channel are in the description below. Thanks again, and this is the Rewriter, writing out.